first see how this operates.
One moment. Oh.
Right. I'll start with a question. My first question would be: does everybody or does anybody know what the difference is between mineral and biological growing? I'd like you guys to think about it, because it's a big topic all over Europe, and I will try to explain to you the difference between those two today. Let me see. Right, I found out how that works. My name is Joep. I just got a really great introduction, thank you for that. I work already for 25 years in this industry. My colleague Mark, sitting over there, is the Russian representative. We both work for a company called Plagron, and I will tell you a little bit more about that, how it was founded later on. But we are a market leader in substrates and soil solutions, as well as we work all over the world with our fertilizers, being organic, sorry, and mineral. Today I will briefly tell you a little bit about growing, which you probably all know a little bit, so I will go fast through that. I will touch upon how nutrients work. I will touch upon how soils and substrates work, and will end with some additives and other products that you can use for growing indoors and outdoors. We're from Holland. The thing is, in Holland, and my previous colleague also said that we have a very rich indoor tradition of growing in glass houses, in urban gardens, and with artificial lights. Basically meaning that tradition is already there for over 100 years and being passed on by generation on generation. In our case, 2 generations before, somebody in a glass house wanted to increase its qualities and was growing on soil, and invented worm casting. Or he didn't invent it, it was already there, but he started to use it and he started to professionalize it. And he first used it in his own glass house, and it worked really, really well. And his neighbors, as you can see, there's all glass houses over there, his neighbors also started to use it. And at a certain point he stopped growing tomatoes, but he started growing worms or worm casting, and a small company called Plagron was born at that point. So we have a long tradition in soils and substrates. Well, if you look at a plant, basically you've all been here, so I don't have to really repeat it a lot, but a plant basically needs some elements that are necessary. It's light and temperature. If it's really too cold, like here in Russia, plants don't grow. Light is also a very important part, so it's 2 parts that most of the time, we're not going to do further things in that. Then you have something that's often forgotten, but time and space is a very important part. Most people want to have the plants ready in 2 or 3 days. Well, I can tell you, only a few plants you can harvest in 2 days. Most take longer. Then, of course, air and water, which is very important. I'll get back to that later a little bit. And our specialty, nutrients and soil substrate. So a soil substrate basically has 3 properties. The first one would be there's mineral in there. Minerals are always in substrates. Some are good and some are really bad. Then a substrate has a sort of structure. The structure makes a plant grow well or not grow well. if you have, for example, clay can have a very good water absorbent and regenerated water really well, but it has sharp edges which roots don't really like. So a good substrate needs to be rumbly and really air, and in a 50-50 comparison. You have the substrate on 50% and you have the other 50% would be air and water. Air is really important in the substrate. And last but not least, you have a lot of bacteria, fungi, and animals living in your substrate. If you look at the picture on the other side, it really tells you a little bit the difference between mineral and biological growing, basically meaning that on the right side you see the mineral part where you have immediately the absorbance and the elements that the plant needs ready for the plant. And the left side is the cycle of biological growing. Basically, in both cases, this is really important, both cases the plant only takes up the elements, so the minerals. So even if you grow biologically, the plant still takes up the minerals. Okay, I'll get back to it later. As a substrate, and you probably, and I will go into that a little bit later also, you have 4 different types or 3 different types of substrate, and they also include the type of growing. That's the soil substrate, which I already a little bit told you about. But there's also cocoa. Cocoa, I will tell you a little bit later on how that evolved. And then you have inert or soil living less substrate. They probably tell you a little bit about what they actually do, and what they don't do is they enable a plant to stand up. So inert substrates need all the minerals they get straight from the formulas you give to them. Whereas for soil substrates that's not the case, because in the soil there's also minerals. Okay, if we go further into the soil minerals, a good soil has perlite, which are the white bubbles. They make it airy. A good soil has peat in it. It can have pH stabilizers, and it can do several other things. What you don't want to have in your soil is compost, things you have from your garden, sewage slough, and the other one, bark, which is from trees. I'll explain to you later. What's important is, and it's on the left side, on the right side for you, sorry, the peats are in different qualities, and the way the peat is makes the quality of the soil. Peat in itself has a very fine quality. It can absorb water and nutrients, and it can give them to the plant. Then absorb them again and give them to the plant. And it can do that many, many times. And by that, it feeds the plant every time with minerals and water. The white peat, which is in the fields harvested, is on top of those fields. The black peat is really, really down on the field. So those fields are there for thousands and thousands of years. And the white peat is the most fresh one, but also the peat with the most and the best air water balance. If you see of how white peat has been harvested, there's a difference between big machines that make dust out of white peat and harvested by blocks. You have to dry the peat before you harvest it, or before you use it. If you dry it in blocks, the air balance in the water stays there. If you harvest it in dust, it still is good, but it has less water air in it. So, as I told you before, the peat comes from fields we control ourselves, in Germany and in Lithuania. We make sure there's no military exercise on it. We make sure that nothing happens to the pit, so we don't want any contamination. They are controlled by an independent external company to make sure the quality is okay. We make sure also in our mixes, like I said, there's no bark, because bark will take up nitrogen, which doesn't go to the plant as a crucial element. We don't put any sewage sludge in it, because that's the shit of your neighbor, and we don't want that in our mixes. And we don't put any compost in it, because that brings heavy metals in it, and it's also not good for the quality of your fruits or whatever you're growing, because eventually you will get it somewhere in your food or whatever you do with it. There's a possibility of using the bottom lines of black peat, and that is that Mother Nature has provided us with a solution that if you, before you harvest black peat, you can put it you can leave it there as is, and it has to stay there for a winter period. The water inside the peat, the black peat, freezes up, and by that it expands and it brings more air into the black peat, and then you can use black peat almost as the same way as you can use white peat. So you would understand that Russian black peat would be far better than German black peat, because it's much colder here. I already noticed that. One of the things that is really important with using when you use substrates and soils is the water. There's a few things. If you use too much water or too less water, you will have a blocked nutrient uptake. You will have different nutrients that won't go into the things. You will have fungi and bacteria that can easily get to your plants, and you will get a lot of trouble and a headache. So what you really want to have is an ideal water balance. You can do that by just waiting or looking at your plants, but it's my experience that many people give too much water, and so I always advise to buy a tension meter and keep your substrates between 80 and 100 millibars. With that, you always have the right water tension, and this is really important because, like I said before, most of the new growers give their plants too much water. And in Holland we have an opposite problem, because the most experienced glasshouse growers tend to give their plants too little water. Okay. This is basically well, you can read it all. I can't, sorry. But it says what it says, so you have to take my word for it. It's correct. Oh, that's why I went. Oh, so. All right. Nutrients. There's two types of nutrients: minerals and biological. Basically, the difference with minerals is, and I will show you some examples of mineral nutrients in a minute. Mineral nutrients get directly to the plant. Mineral nutrients go really, you can really fine-tune when you use mineral nutrients, because there's no in-between process. And mineral nutrients actually are being used for large setups and large grow situations, like glasshouses only work with mineral nutrients. Biological nutrients, they have minerals and they have enablers. What they do, those enablers, is they provide the ground solutions for an active soil life. I will get into that a little bit later. So your plant gets more of a balanced surrounding in the soil life. This is the first mineral nutrient as an example. This is especially for the soil. A mineral nutrient always consists of macro, micro, secondary and trace elements. I just happened to jump in a few times and most of you already know, so I'll go through that fast, but macronutrients are the main nutrients: NPK, nitrates, phosphorus and potassium. Then you have the micronutrients, the calcium, sulfur and magnesium, and the trace elements. Depending on what kind of plant you grow, the balance of those mineral nutrients is really important. So to avoid any trace elements, you need a balance that is specially made for the plants you grow or the way you grow. That doesn't mean that if you grow, and this is a mineral nutrient made for soil mixes on the right side, that doesn't mean you don't have an active soil life, because in the soil you will always have an active soil life. So it's actually an active soil life with the mineral nutrient, and you have a quick response every time you start to correct or you start to feed it. So it's actually the best of both worlds in this case. Another nutrient, another medium I just explained to you is cocos. The nice thing about cocos is actually that it's very environmental friendly. It's a waste product of the coconut production in countries like India and Sri Lanka. It's made out of cocoa dust, which is the bottom last product of everything they can get out of a coconut. And the thing with cocoa is that it's really airy and can do the same things as peat can. It can take up water and nutrients, and it can give them away, and it also keeps the substrate really airy. The thing is with cocoa, before it can be used, it has to be processed. Like I said, it's really salt when they start using it, so it has to be flushed and rinsed with water, fresh water. Then it has to be dried. Then that used to be the only thing they did, but now with experience, all good cocos are being rinsed and dried for 3 or 4 times, or 2 or 3 times. That's the first thing that's really important about cocoa. And the second thing is, how do you want to buffer it? The buffering means that the cocoa, when you start growing it, it gives little off. It lets you use the mineral you give to the feeding barrel, but at the same time it takes up some elements that are being connected to the cocoa flakes. Those elements are like kalium, magnesium. So in the beginning, if you, for example, would use a Terra fertilizer on a cocoa bag, you would have deficiencies. But with a cocoa A and B, it's so balanced that you won't have any deficiencies. So that's why I already explained to you that it's really important that the substrate you have is in line with the feeding you give. That's in these 2 cases really important. Not in the next one, because this one is made for inert mediums. They don't react. They have everything. Everything the plant needs comes into the plant by giving him the mineral feeding. The nice thing about this system is that you can really fine-tune whatever you want to grow. So you can do an NFT system, you can do deep water cultivation, you can do what most of the people do, rockwool cultivation. So it's really the way the really big growers grow in with this kind of products. There's only one disadvantage. If you think you do a weekend in Moscow and your pump breaks down and you're back on Monday, your plants probably will be all dead because there's no backup plan or anything. They don't get anything. So if you're away for 2 or 3 days, anything can happen. What's really important with the minerals, and this is a big difference between mineral growing and biological growing. Minerals, you really have to measure your pH. If you don't, you will get up having deficiencies. For example, if your pH that's the way the acid value of your feeding barrel. The acid value, normal water is around 7, which is neutral, and to grow plants you have to get a little bit on the sour side of the neutral part. As you can see on the graphic, almost all important nutrients or elements have a range of 5.2 to 6.2, and that's really something. If you grow mineral, you should not forget to measure. What a lot of people do is that they measure inside the barrel where they mix the nutrients and then put it in the system. That's okay, but that's not where the plant gets its feeding. If you really want to know what the plant does, and it's very often that for a plant, if you think that, for example, you have your barrel standing on 5.8 and you think you're good, and then your plant can have a far less acid environment, which makes it. Oh, I see that I have to break it down a little bit. So this is. I'll go a little bit faster. This is the biological nutrient. The biological nutrient, basically, well, you can read it better than I can. The best thing about Project Liquid is that it's not that it gives you. It's easier to grow with a biological. It's and that's the next slide also. What the biological ingredient does is improving the environment, and that environment is a symbiosis between what happens on top of the plant and what happens below. On top of the plant you get oxygen, or air is being sucked up by the stomata. Those stomatas bring in carbon dioxide, and with photosynthesis they make sugars out of that. Those same sugars are being transported down below and are being used by the roots. I'll explain to you that later in a fast way. The nice thing about growing biological is that you have an even uptake of nutrients. There's always nutrients available for the plant. There's always a nice way, even if you flush it out, if you think then still the processes are the same. This is an example of the sugars that a plant provides that attracts a bacteria called rhizobium, and that rhizobium colonizes itself inside the plant, and with enzymes it converts nitrogen to ammoniac, and ammoniac is something plants can use. So both profit from the bacteria eats the sugars, and the plant gets this nitrogen which he normally could not get out of the air. The same is with the mycorrhiza. My colleague already told you a little bit about it, but basically the mycorrhiza also gets sugar in return for a better root system. There are also pathogene bacteria and fungi. Well, like the wilt with the picture on the left side. If you, for example, have too much water, you can easily get that. Your plants on the stem can break. You can prevent this by using water stoph peroxide and spray it on the stems of your plants. I'll get to that later. Oh, this is the last slide. There are some different things that are not really part of a mineral or a biological nutrient. We have a green sensation, which is basically something you use at the end. Gives you a better harvest, bigger tops, and it's actually a 4-in-1. It's an enhancer, it's a booster. It has enzymes in it, and it has an abundance of KEK. So you get better results at the end of the day. We have a power roots, which basically enables your roots to go faster, thicker, you get healthier plants. And we have a sugar rheol, which is really special because it gives you plants more energy, and at the same time it increases the taste of everything you grow. I would like to welcome you to our website, plagron.com. It's in English, sorry for that, but if you want to have Russian explanations, down on the bottom you have downloads, and then those downloads are in Russian too. I only have one little, I hope my question at the beginning of this little speech was mineral versus biological growing. I hope I explained it to you a little bit, and I hope you can make a good choice in which way. The only thing I know, for our company, it doesn't matter that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and some questions from people. Take it, please. Так, ну мы поднимаем руки, и микрофон бежит к вам. Все нормально? Уюба, слышно?
Я.
Окей.
Здравствуйте. Скажите, пожалуйста, вот вы керамзит продаете вот, именно флагон, как среду для выращивания. Потом очистка от корневой системы, как это происходит, вот этот керамзит. Керамзит как очистить? Повторно можно его использовать или нужно новый керамзит брать? Да.
Keramzit? Oh, okay. You mean clay pebbles? I suppose, yeah, you do. You don't have to clean them. You have to really, okay. You have to really flush them. But the thing is with clay pebbles, they tend to get acids in them in the clay itself. So if you don't flush them out, the acids stay there. So you get and plants don't really like that. So acids are being built up in the clay pebbles. But if you flush them with fresh water, you can reuse them. Is that okay for you?
Это перед началом использования, а после уже.
Я думаю, если вы хотите задать какой-то дополнительный вопрос, лучше микрофон, чтобы переводчики, наверное, переводили. Ответьте, Юб, на ваш вопрос. Окей, next questions, please.
Здравствуйте. Вопрос о стимуляторе Green Sensation. Первое, как он уживается с микробиотой, то есть с микроорганизмами, что его делает таким удивительно хорошим и таким удивительно дорогим.
Really easy for me to answer. It's not really expensive to start with, because what you get back from it is far better than it costs basically. It's partly because it contains enzymes and it brings in your soil life, and it's partly because it has some amino acids in there that provide extra activity in your soil, in your substrate. And last but not least is the fact that at the end of your flower you want to have extra kalium available and phosphorus, which is also very known, and you probably know that also, to boost up the end of your fruits. So normally you would have, for example, a PK 1314. That's if you use that at the end of your growing, which works also. Then you get larger fruits and more denser fruits. In this case, it has all those different things one together. So if you buy them all together, if you buy them all separately, I don't think you would pay what you're paying for the green sensation.
Так, я так понимаю, Юб ответил на вопрос. Да, давайте последний вопрос зададим и в тайминг, чтобы нам уложиться.
Добрый день. Хотел поинтересоваться по поводу вымывания кальция при реверсивно-капельном поливе на кокосе. Как можно решить эту проблему и как лично вы советуете пользоваться вашей таблицей как производителя или производить свою инфокалькуляцию?
I didn't really get your question, but I got the sign that I have to close down, I believe. So maybe we can talk afterwards on it. That's better. Is that okay for you? I think I get the drift, but I'm not 100% sure. Please, if you have any questions, because I understood it was the last question, please feel free to come up to me and I'll make sure that you get an answer. Is that okay for you?
Last one. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Добрый день. Может ли выдержка из биогумуса заменить минеральное удобрение при естественном выращивании в почве? Применяли ли вы это в Голландии? Спасибо. Выдержка из биогумуса жизнедеятельности дождевых червей.
The extract? Oh, the extract. Sorry.
Yes.
From? Extract from humus? No, we don't use it. I know what you mean. We don't use it in our products or anything. So.
Окей, thank you. Давайте поддержим, поблагодарим за выступление. Я хочу напомнить, что сегодня состоится автопарий. Пройдет он в клубе «Агломерат», что в районе Cree. Билеты можно купить на сайте, можно, если у вас уже куплены эти билеты, поменяйте их на браслет на ресепшене, чтобы можно было легко зайти. И можно, в принципе, будет на входе также приобрести билет. Поэтому, если хотите в неформальной обстановке пообщаться, я надеюсь, что большинство спикеров и участников выставки